All right, let's talk about what Trump and Doge have been doing with the IRS. Spoiler alert, it involves gunning people. So there's a lot of debate whether we should even have the IRS and income tax and all that. But let's get rid of that because that's just a huge debate that could take a whole video. Let's focus on just slimming down the IRS and with they claim stuff like, oh, it only goes after poor people, or Biden hired all these extra employees to um, go after more middle class folks and blah 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 blah. So we are going to read this article here, and then we're going to bring in our favorite MAGA consultant, ChatGPT. If you don't know, I like to bring in ChatGPT just to kind of get more information on stuff because ChatGPT is owned by a right wing company, a right wing CEO, currently involved in the Stargate project that the Trump administration started. So if there's any bias at all in ChatGPT, it would be a conservative bias. So it's not like I'm using DeepSeek or whatever, some communist liberal bot or anything. So yeah, anyways, okay. So President Trump is slashing funds to U.S. government services like the IRS. Here's why this tax season could be extra risky for Americans. It's been a couple of rough years for the Internal Revenue Service, IRS, and while you may find it hard to sympathize with the tax man, its problems could become your problems. The organization has been working to address shortcomings in its taxpayer services, refund, and returns processing, as well as IT, but cuts to its funding and labor force threaten to halt progress and reduce service levels. The IRS annual budget remained flat from fiscal 2023 to fiscal 2024. Nearly $80 billion was allocated to the agency under the Inflation Reduction Act. Most of this monetary infusion was going to go towards expanding enforcement, but some was meant for other initiatives like improving technology, attracting skilled workers, and quickly resolving taxpayer issues. But Republicans have chipped away at that figure since it was enacted in 2022. According to the Associated Press, a 2023 debt ceiling and budget cuts deal between Republicans and the White House resulted in $1.4 billion rescinded from the agency and a separate agreement to take $20 billion from the IRS over the next 2 years and divert those funds to other non-defense programs. The agency lost an additional $20 billion through an error in September 2024 funding bill. In November 2024, the Treasury Deputy Secretary Wally Ademo told AP reporters that cuts would have a material impact on the IRS. The IRS is going to potentially have to make dramatic decisions about stopping hiring and starting to budget for a world in which they don't have $20 billion, which will stop a lot of their progress, he said. If they don't get that $20 billion that is at risk, they would run out of enforcement money at the current pace sometime in fiscal year 2025. Insufficient resources for the agency could also negatively impact the federal deficit, said Maya McGinnis, president of Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. Now, President Trump and a Republican controlled Congress mean further sweeping changes. Yeah, like, okay. I'm going to try to give this as super neutral as I can. But when it comes down to it, if you remove all the propaganda that is told and misinformations that are spread about the IRS and their purpose, don't you think the IRS is kind of a good thing if you care about the deficit and the debt? Because the IRS is, investigating fraud and stuff like that, bringing in more money from people not paying taxes, whether that be rich or not. So from just a super neutral, you're supposed to pay taxes by the law. I'm just stating what's an objective fact, not no bias. So they should be in favor of beefing up the IRS to, bring in more tax like revenue and make sure everything that should be coming in is coming in, and that brings in more money. But wait, they don't actually care about the deficit, and I'll say this a million times, they don't. They care about giving a tax cut to the rich and I wonder why they don't want to go after the IRS. Now, we're still going to talk to ChatGPT and see how true they are or how wrong I am, whatever. But the reason that they want to cut it is not because it goes after poor people or middle class people. It's because it goes after them, the rich. Everything circles back. Look at their policies more closely. Everything circles back to protecting the wealthy class and hurting the poor and middle class. Yeah, now I don't know where I am. Yeah, okay. The IRS can't beef up its workforce. That's where we are. The next blow came to the IRS labor force on January 20th. President Donald Trump, looking to slash funding of government agencies, ordered a hiring freeze on federal civilian employees. The freeze will last indefinitely for the IRS until the U.S. Treasury Secretary determines that it is in national interest to lift the freeze. Then Donald Trump offered buyouts to all federal employees who left their jobs by February 6th. Although IRS employees involved in this year's tax filing season must wait until May 15th, issues that extend beyond this may be handled by a reduced staff. In light of these changes, and ahead of his likely firing by Trump, the head of the IRS, Commissioner Danny Werfel, resigned, leaving the agency without leadership until Trump's pick is confirmed. Most recently, the Trump administration is looking at deputizing IRS agents to help with immigration enforcement. What the fuck? Bro, this has to be satire. This has to be. We're living in a simulation, man. What the fuck? Deputizing IRS agents to help with immigration enforcement? What the fuck? It is unlikely the IRS will be able to secure more resources under the new administration. Trump has suggested eliminating federal income taxes altogether. Reuters reports that on February 13th, a senior member of the Elon Musk-led Department of Government Efficiency visited the IRS and started looking for places to make cuts. Some of the burden will fall on taxpayers. These changes create new risk for taxpayers. Some of these could be seen as soon as this filing season, but have the potential to severely impact future seasons. My office is hearing that Doge is now at the IRS. That means Musk henchmen are in a position to dig through a trove of data about every taxpayer in America. And if your refund is delayed, they could very well be the reason, said Oregon Senator Ron Wyden on X. Musk responded with laughing emojis. It seems like the IRS will be working with less funding and fewer people than it needs. It expects to receive more than 140 million tax returns ahead of the deadline this season. In fiscal year 2024, only 31% of callers through the IRS reach an assistant. Deputy Secretary DeMaio has said that with funding cuts, call wait times will surge. Yeah, so it's already bad and they're going to make it worse. Not being able to get proper answers to your tax questions increase your risk of filing an incorrect return, which can lead to substantial monetary penalties. Once you filed your return, it's possible that funding and staffing reductions will also add to the existing problem of processing delays. And a reduction in resources is not likely to help fix the issue. Cuts could even result in a higher chance of being audited. Deputy can't talk. Deputy Secretary Adamayo pointed out that less funds for technology means less ability to develop artificial intelligence and machine learning that are used for big ticket enforcement actions. If fewer of these are undertaken, it may mean audits on middle class taxpayers will increase because they're easier to do without advanced technology. If you want to appeal an IRS decision, this is also likely to take longer. So yeah, I've heard this before. When you handicap the IRS and cut them down, then they don't have, it takes a lot of resources to investigate someone with a lot of money, understandably so, because, they could have dozens of companies, just dozens of flows of income and expenses. It takes a lot of manpower to look into that. So when you cut away all the manpower, the employees that are there are like, well, we have to do something. So they go after the middle and poor class because that's a lot simpler. Now, likely, if we go back to the neutral take on the IRS, I'm not trying to use the argument of like they use for data, like if you haven't committed any crimes and you have nothing to hide. I'm not trying to make that argument here, but from a neutral standpoint, if you've done everything right with your taxes and you have nothing to hide, then you should have no problem with the IRS. Just Just stating that. So currently it takes almost 2 years on average to resolve identity theft cases, which affect nearly 500,000 taxpayers. One of the recommendations made by National Taxpayer Advocate Erin M. Collins in her 2024 annual report to Congress was to refrain from reassigning identity theft victim assistance until staff to other roles during the filing season. This will be made more difficult in the face of agency-wide understaffing, so if your identity is stolen, you could face much longer delays in getting help from the IRS. So yeah, like identity theft and all that, that's already something that takes years to resolve. Imagine how it's going to be now. Insane. So I have a question for ChatGPT. This is all the prompt is. So Republicans want to cut the IRS with claims like it only goes after poor people and Biden only expanded it to go after the middle class, not the rich. Is there any truth to these claims? And would cutting the IRS be beneficial to the American people? Try to keep your answer somewhat brief but detailed. I don't feel like listening to fucking Sir Yapington here talk my ear off. So let's see what we get. Okay. So the claims that the IRS only goes after poor people and that Biden expanded it to go after the middle class, not the rich, are misleading but not entirely baseless. Uh-oh. IRS enforcement and low-income audits. Historically, the IRS has audited lower-income individuals, particularly those claiming the Earned Income Tax Credit, at disproportionately high rates. This isn't because the IRS targets poor people, but because they have fewer resources and auditing simple tax returns is cheaper and easier than pursuing wealthy individuals with complex financial structures. However, it's worth noting that the absolute number of audits of lower income earners is still far lower than those of high earners. So yeah, kind of like we talked about. When you take away the IRS's resources, they're just going to go after what's easier to do because they still have to do their job, but they don't have the resources to go after wealthy people. So it's crazy. Like they got these agencies and make them worth it just to fit their narrative. It's like how they say government's bad, government doesn't help you. It's because Republicans are always kneecapping the government so it can't help you. And they will kneecap it to a point to make their claims somewhat true. It's crazy. So, number 2, Biden's expansion of the IRS. The Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 allocated around $80 billion to the IRS with the intent of modernizing outdated systems and improving tax enforcement, particularly against high-income earners and corporations. The Treasury Department and IRS leadership explicitly stated that the new funding would focus on wealthy tax evaders rather than increasing audits on middle and low-income taxpayers. With some feared mission creep, early evidence suggests that audits of high earners have already increased. Would cutting the IRS help Americans? Cutting the IRS budget would likely increase the tax gap, the difference between taxes owed and taxes collected, which disproportionately benefits wealthy tax evaders. The IRS already struggles with outdated technology and staff shortages, leading to delays in tax processing and refunds. Reducing its funding could mean fewer audits of wealthy individuals and corporations, increasing the burden on honest taxpayers and exacerbating deficits. Conclusion: while past IRS enforcement has affected low-income individuals at a high rate, the recent expansion aims to reverse that trend by targeting high earners who evade taxes. Cutting the IRS would likely hurt the average American by making tax enforcement weaker for the rich and worsening service for regular taxpayers. Straight from the MAGA consultant's mouth. What do you think? It's like with a lot of Republican claims, it sounds appealing on the surface, sometimes good, but you just have to just dig just a little bit, just a tiny bit, and then you can see just how ridiculous it all is. It's their playbook for everything. Don't believe me? Give me a good comment below on why I'm wrong. Anyways, I'll see you in the next one. If you made it to this point in the video, I just want to give a special thank you. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button down below. And if you really enjoyed it, maybe consider hitting that subscribe button while you're down there. I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section. I will try to reply to any and all comments that I can. Until next time, watch that video on screen.